If you guys missed it, a couple of days ago, the devs announced that the finale would be coming, not this coming Tuesday, but the one after. And though they didn't give us a full trailer, they gave us an image which more or less seems to confirm the final map, the location, the place the grand finale of Season 3 will be taking place, is going back to the ruined kingdom of Ur. And I can honestly say that this is thrilling to me. I'm probably just as excited about going to Ur in a couple of weeks here in 2017 as I was moving into Guild Wars 2 altogether. And back then, Ur was the place I was most excited to go to of all. And that's because, for those of you who may have missed out on Guild Wars 1's presentation of this area of the world, specifically for Prophecies, where everything started, Ur was a huge part of the plot. Ur was being mentioned by all the characters all the time. It defined, like the big villain came from Ur. It was a huge thing that set up the entire story we were taking part in. And yet, in Guild Wars 1, not in Prophecies where it had all this relevance, not in either of the campaigns, not in the expansion even, though it slightly had a look in Edgewise, in none of these places did we actually get to go to the region itself. And so it really set it up as this layered, history-rich, beautiful, incredible place that nonetheless none of us had ever seen. And so in 2012, that was one of the things I was so keen on going to Ur, just seeing what it was like. And not only did it have all this relevance from the first game, but the devs made it even more interesting by introducing all this stuff with an Elder Dragon to do with it. Now, unfortunately, as with many things in 2012, I wasn't too happy with the ultimate implementation with Ur, but the lore remains the same. And so that excitement for me, now that we're going back, also remains the same. Let's really dissect and see what this place is like. For the complete newbies out there who just kind of blindly ran through and didn't know what they were in when they were at Ur. Ur is a land that's already interesting because it's a land that historically was inhabited by incredibly magically adept humans who could do all this fascinating, wonderful, amazing stuff that other humans couldn't even do. And with it, they built this astounding, mysterious, cool architecture, like these giant rings that are in this screenshot and kind of tip the hat to let us know that it probably is all we're going to, and all these other wonderful, brilliant places, all this culture, all this civilization from these humans. That is enough to me to make it at least on par with a place like Kreiter. But then add on top of that this is a kingdom that was built on top of a sleeping Elder Dragon, and Elder Dragons really are so defining of the Guild Wars 2 storyline. It's a kingdom that has a city at its heart, which was housing gods, or godlike beings, depending on, what your perspective is there. So gods actually lived in this city. Nowhere else can really lay claim to that, at least not from a human perception. Then this place was abandoned by the gods, and it went through an entire period of history where the people continued to preserve where the gods once lived and keep it pristine and nice, and the Orion people went on, and that is also a really interesting period of Ur's history to me. Then it was, of course, attacked by a raging warlike group of enemies, the Char, and there was a huge war which the game has told us about but really hasn't shown us much about. Like, for example, one of the unfortunate things about Ur in 2012 is where are all the ghostly Char around? There was a huge invading army that was taken out in the Cataclysm. Where are all those bodies? Maybe they can rectify that in this upcoming release. But it was attacked by the Char, and there's this whole huge chapter. It was, of course, sank below the sea in this cataclysm when a lost scroll was read by Vizier Kilbron, transforming him into a lich. So it's got this entire period of history where it was under the sea, risen back out, and then became a land of undead. And then finally, the most recent chapter of Ur is the one that we got in 2012 that the developers presented to us, which was us cleansing it and a war being staged against those undead in Ur. It's great, right? There's so much here. I think the only area of Tyria that may be more layered and have more interesting things going on could be Ascalon. I mean, Ascalon's got the faux fire, and it has the searing, and it has the brand going through it, and a lot of different things. But Ur is fantastic. That final chapter of the personal story we got in 2012 really fell flat in a lot of ways. Obviously because of budget, obviously because of scope, obviously because it couldn't get the attention that it needed. But it had the makeup for something truly epic, something really incredible, with the magic and the ancient majesty of the land being contrasted with these heroes of the Pact with their airships and their tanks and their submarines. I loved so much of what Ur could have been, should have been, And now here we are in 2017, we may have that chance again. You know, very recently I've come to imagine what Guild Wars 2 may have been like in 2012 if the devs had identified, look, the end of the story is a bit weak. The final boss, for example, is kind of the crowning achievement of how weak it was, but the whole thing was a bit weak, really. What if they'd identified that? What if they hadn't released Ore in 2012 and instead saved it for a couple of months later? You know, added the Zaitan fight and the Orion areas after the rush of release had passed, once they had learned a bit about how the game works, once they had a bit more space. It also would have given a lot more direction to those early updates after the game release instead of randomly dropping in something like South Sun Cove, and they probably wouldn't have leaked so many players. It could have been a really good way to have handled the development of Guild Wars 2, and they didn't go for it. Imagine, guys, if they had. Imagine if they had time and the budget and the learning of the release itself to make something truly great. Well, hold on. That's exactly what's happening right here, right now in 2017. Now they are going back. They do know how the game works. They have learned what good storytelling is. I do believe that the game is telling its story and giving us new exploration stuff at the best it ever has before. The only thing better than going to it in Living World Season 3, of course, would have been going to or in an expansion, and maybe both can still happen. But this really is the best of both worlds, and all those old excitements and all that stuff, all the building blocks are still there, and it's all just resurged to me. So I'm really, really thrilled about this. I think out of any map, definitely in Season 3, this one I'm suddenly super pumped about. Let's look at some of the improvements we've got with the game now, right? We have that stuff I mentioned in the most recent video, that there's this actual Orion language, and they potentially might have dropped all these glyphs and things around that we, the players, can translate. So that's extra world building, that's extra lore that we can pick up from that. We actually have tech in the game now where, as our characters wander around these places, they speak and they refer to things, right? As you're playing the story, if you remember in Ember Bay, as you walk over to the circus, your character will say, wow, there's a circus here? That's really weird. You know, that's an extra layer of detail and quality that we never had in 2012 when we went to Ore before. Imagine all the cool little things our characters might be saying in this update. We've got potential new meta event stuff going on in Ore. That excites me too. Of course, most of the meta event stuff in 2012 all revolved around the temples, and there was a very interesting idea at play there. Kind of went away once mega servers became a thing, but it was mostly just to do with the temples. Well, we might actually get some different kind of a world boss here. We've got all of these masteries and new ways to traverse the landscape as well. They'll potentially add another mastery, and so we've got all the mushrooms and the gliding and all the Heart of Thorn stuff built on top of now all the stuff from Season 3 and potentially some final things. So excellent exploration, and the best thing as well, I mean, it's the finale, they could put more effort into it, but this is Team 3 as well, guys. I would say out of all of Season 3, the most beautiful area that we've gone to, the best map, probably, was Bitterfrost Frontier. I mean, some of you guys might disagree, but I really think, and especially that forest, Bitterfrost Frontier knocked it out of the park. And, well, it's Team 3 doing this update as well. The only thing that worries me a little bit is Team 3 didn't do too well with the story stuff. We had that really horrendous boss and some obviously cut stuff. So hopefully that doesn't happen again, but this could be great. And so what are some of the new things I wanted to talk to you guys about that we might actually get more detail on, or that I'm really looking forward to from this map now that we get to go back in 2017? Like, what are some of the places that the devs can embellish upon, which is very important for this update, because since 2012, the story has shifted a bit. It started dealing with the nature of magic, has introduced in much more concrete terms the idea of ley lines, and so to be able to draw connections between what happened in 2012 story and later is something the narrative has sorely needed for a while, and I think that they will have a few opportunities to do that here. So first thing, one thing I'm really excited about, and I think you guys should look out for when we get to this map, okay, is place names and region titles, okay? Now, this might sound really boring, but again, in 2012, they obviously had all this great, rich backstory and world building and interesting setting, but they didn't have the time or the budget or anything to really flesh it out. So the one place where they got to do a lot of that, though, that I can see that did make it into the game, is stuff like the names of a lot of the points of interest we got and the areas we go to, right? So in the lore, the people of Ore, you guys might not know this, they have a lot of like Arabic and Egyptian and sort of Middle Eastern influence in them. But the devs never had too much chance to show that off, except when we walk over to, say, a cave or a tomb or something, and we hear it's called the Zokafa Catacombs, right? And then you realize Zokafa is actually drawing from some like Persian language or something. So they really pulled that off really well, and I'm hoping that in the new map they do a lot of that too, just to give you guys an idea of some of the cool things that existed back in 2012 and I want to see more of in this update. As a Kabar, okay, now that's the tomb, it's called the Royal Tombs. This is where part of the personal story really kind of ends. It's where you do the ritual to summon the last king of Ur and figure out what's going on with the source of Ur. As a Kabar is actually a real world language. It's Urdu. I think it's an ancient historical Persian language, and it literally means, if you translate it, means torment of the grave, which I think on Wiki they speculate might be a reference to some Arabic idea of like purgatory. It's like the period after you die but before you go on to be judged or whatever. And there's tons of that all over Ur, and I want this new map to have the same. So again, there's Okafa Catacombs, there's Bakir Sarari, Beit Fahalin, which means home of the peasants, Al Jarin Beit, Is al-Din Sarari, which means glory of religion in Arabic. Everywhere, guys. This stuff's going to be so cool. There's some lore as well from before the game came out, which never really translated into the game very well, but it's the idea that there are people of Orient descent who live back in Kryta in Divinity's Reach, but they don't talk about it ever because they're ashamed, and because the place is associated so much with death now, and or at least, you know, before we defeated Zaitan. Well, characters like that we've never really got to interface with, to talk to show off very much, but if we're at a place in the story now, as this screenshot seems to show, where the place has been cured, we might actually get to see those become a part of the game itself now, and they might finally be able to dive into that a little bit. Beyond that, for area names too, there's just loads of other stuff. It doesn't even have to be, you know, borrowing from other languages, exotic sounding languages. Any of the areas that were sort of named for their influence from the gods were brilliant as well. The Cathedral of Murdered Dreams, the Winterkeel Labyrinth, the Theatre of Delight, Mirror Bay, and so on. If all these places actually had some kind of, you know, in-game codex, or there were in-game lore books, or there was just some way to derive small, you know, 1-2 paragraph descriptions about what each of these locations would be like, I would be over the moon. There's just a real magic to Ur, and I'm hoping that this next update will capture that and will really drive further of that forward. So, there's that, of course, there's the setting, there's the places that we'll go. Hopefully it will look very pretty. So, of course, I did just mention that, yes, it's being cleansed now. So, at the end of the personal story, we see Treherne rams Caladbolg, the Thorn of the Pale Tree, into what they call the Source of Ur, and we see this place be cleansed. So there are these theories that, is that not just Morgemoth's influence somehow seeping in? We do, of course, know that the Elder Dragons fought one another and would continue to vie for territory and for magic. And so I think that this is a really good opportunity for the devs to talk about that more. There's a lot of haziness about what kinds of magic dragons are supposed to be weak to. So the devs have talked about some ideas of, like, the blighting pods were born from Morgemoth sucking up Zaitan's, you know, command over death. And then you kind of had the blighting pods, which combined the plantiness with the deathiness. And then there was lots of cloning and things going on. I think good answers to this kind of stuff will be really important for this patch. And specifically as well, talking about, say, the Source of Ur, and confirming, yeah, this is a leyline hub, like in very hard, clear terms for people to see without having to read between the lines or look in very obscure places. I think that that's something that they should do very much as well. We talked a little bit as well about Zaitan's death earlier, and I think that that too is really important. So if this map is anywhere around that tower that we saw in our story mode, for those that don't know, there's a tower that Zaitan clings to. It's actually a point of interest. Obviously, it's some cut part of the fight that never became in the game, but there's a point of interest that you as a player should not actually be able to get unless you're fly hacking or doing something ridiculous. And it's called, like, Zaitan's Heart or Zaitan's Roost, I think, or something like that. To actually be able to get a little bit more explanation about what happened to Zaitan after he fell off of the tower, and to maybe just clean up some of the messiness that was left over from way back when, I think will be super, super satisfying for me to see. To maybe establish that this new map has unbound magic all over it again, and to maybe show that some of this is from Zaitan's body, or maybe to show that there were people who came to Zaitan after he had died and started trying to take power from him. I actually, around when Season 3 started, hosted a competition on my channel for gems, a short story competition where people wrote little fan fictions. One of my favorite entries was someone who wrote about this idea of someone coming to Zaitan's body to try and capitalize on the leaking magic for themselves. So I really want to see a little bit of influence from that. If we actually get Zaitan's body on the new map, that would be incredible. We, of course, do know that there was a big data mined map a long time ago. I showed you a video. You can check out the link in the description. It seemed to have been some kind of weird cross between Ore and the Fissure of Woe, and featured a giant dragon body on it. And so what exactly that was, we've never been quite sure. The devs did come out and say, yeah, it was an intern, just came to the company, was playing around and wanted to recreate Fissure of Woe in Guild Wars 2. It never became an actual playable map. But there is this weird idea of all the Orient architecture that's on there and the dragon body. Maybe they'll look back to that and put a bit of it in there. Don't forget, Fissure of Woe, of course, has close ties to Balthazar, who presumably will be at our side, giving us extra information about all these wonderful places. Like, I cannot think of a better pairing of a character to have and a region to go than Balthazar and going back to Ore. We, of course, heard in lore as well that Balthazar, like several of the other gods, lived in Ara. I believe there's some story about the Orions hosting like parades, military parades in Balthazar's honor, and he'd watch them across this large courtyard or something. If we can return to a place like that with Balthazar, maybe Balthazar has some business back where he used to live. We get to go there, we get to hear some first-hand accounts of what all was like back in the day. It's just gonna all make my head explode. Could be brilliant. So then there are a couple of other little interesting things that I think the story could really go into. So let's talk about the Bone Dragons as well. Now, in Guild Wars 1, Prophecies, you fought a lot of undead. Now, these undead were under the control of Vizier Kilbron, but they were bodies from Ore, okay? Which is why when you killed undead in Kryta, they dropped decayed Ore emblems, right? And so they were armies of, bodies that Vizier had shifted from, perhaps died in the Cataclysm or died in their war with the Char, influences of which I hope we see in this patch as well. And they'd all gone off to Kryta. Now, with those undead were bone dragons. And in particular, very big, powerful bone dragon to Rotscale. Fast forward to Guild Wars 2, those kinds of bone dragons never really did much or existed anymore, but there were obviously Zaitan's lieutenants, Zaitan's champions, people like Tequatl, people like Blightghast, the Plague Bringer, the guy we fight on Claw Island, and then at the very end of the story in Ara, we are on airships fighting tons of them, and they have these incredibly cool names. Ogravros the Moon Death. I've mentioned him a million times. It's one of my favorite enemy names in this franchise. If we get more details about these bone dragons, because we're back in that location, I think that'd be fantastic, and that's totally on the table. As I mentioned on a previous video, we know for a fact that several Orient undead are ambling around. Wouldn't it make sense that, even though it's been a while since Zaitan died, wouldn't it make sense that the more powerful of those are still around? Maybe we'll even find like an eye or a mouth of Zaitan, some other kings of Ore. Maybe we will see these dragons, and we'll see a little bit of where they came from or what they do, and just get a bit more detail. Were these dragons that lived around Ore when the gods came to Ore? And that leads me on to another thing as well. One big thing that's going on with Guild Wars 2 story right now is not so much the humans and the gods stuff. This is all actually, within the context of Guild Wars 2, very recent history, right? One of the things I loved about Ore in 2012 that I think it did do quite well was it showed just how much influence and how amazing the gods were and how much they did on Tyria in a tiny little space of time, really. They were there for such a little period of time and they did all this stuff. It really showed their power, right? But this is just a small period of time. What Guild Wars 2 is really talking about a lot are the ancient races. Remember when we were in Ember Bay and we got that little bit of information about maybe an alliance between the Forgotten and the Messar and how no one else wanted to fight? What about why Zaitan was in Ore in the first place? What about the last Rising, guys, and what led Zaitan to fall asleep at Ore? What about this fight that was alluded to earlier in the season? So we could even get some great stuff in this map that doesn't just talk about Ore under the control of humans in any of those various eras, or when it was under attack by the Char, or while it was underwater, or while it was under control of the undead very recently. What if it talks about Ore way back when, before even the gods got there? And that, I think, would be really fascinating too. So there's just so much stuff, guys. I think that these are the reasons why I am more excited about this map than any other. It's the finale. Hopefully they do something incredible. On the previous video, I'll wrap mine up here. On the previous video, a lot of you guys wanted me to talk about the boat on the image. Well, I don't really know what to say. A lot of you guys were saying, is it an Alolan boat? Is it a Canthan boat? I heard that it might be in Lion's Arch as well at one point. I really wasn't that struck by this boat, guys. It could just be the art. I think what this shows maybe more than anything is that there's going to be some kind of water access to this area. Depending on where you think the next expansion can be and where things might go, there are some other slight speculations you can make. but I guess I'll have to leave it there before we get into weird leaky territory and stuff. Honestly, I'm not sure how much the boat will matter. All I know is I want a nice regular entrance to the map where I walk through a portal, not sail there. And we should be pretty good. So there you go, guys. This is why Ore is gonna kick ass. That is why I'm really excited about this finale and super pumped that the devs are going back. It's their time to correct and maybe reshuffle a few of the mistakes that they made before and potentially give us a really incredible finale at the same time. That's not even to mention the fact they also released a trailer showing there'll be a new Fractal. Some people think, is it gonna be the Abaddon Fractal? Because they once talked about that, and both of these could be set in like a tropical, happy, nice Ore. I'm not so sure about that, guys. Maybe, but what I'm mostly just looking for is, of course, more story with Ark. So I'll talk to you guys about that more perhaps in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Still got some more stuff I want to talk about with Balthazar with you guys. What excites you about Ore? Or, conversely, who wants to be Devil's Advocate? Who thinks that this is going to be crap because we're going to Ore? Who wanted something else? Love to see in the comments, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, everyone.